I felt him tremble in my arms. That was the moment I knew. Everything I thought about him was wrong. My name is Lucas. I'm 32. And for the last 3 years I've worked as a site foreman for a construction company. It's not the kind of job where you make friends easily. It's sweat, concrete, dust sticking to your skin, and men constantly competing to prove who's the best. And in the middle of it all, there was Roberto. Roberto was a foreman too, but for a competing crew. Same age as me, same role, but we worked on different projects for the same company. We'd cross paths at meetings, supply yards, those moments where all the foremen gathered to discuss schedules. And every time we saw each other, it was like the air got thicker. It wasn't hate, at least not in the beginning. It was just competition. That kind of rivalry that sparks when two men do exactly the same thing, and neither wants to admit the other is good at it. He'd finish a slab in 6 days, I'd finish in 5. I'd solve a foundation issue, he'd show up with a cheaper solution. We were always measuring each other up, comparing, trying to prove something to one another. The others had already picked up on it. When we walked into the same room, people would step aside just to mess with us. "Here come the gladiators," guys would joke, and we fed into it, because it was easier to compete than to admit anything else. There's one memory that stuck. It was a Friday, late afternoon, everyone exhausted after a heavy week. We were at the supply yard picking up materials, and I got there first. I grabbed the last 3 bags of cement I needed. Roberto walked in right after, saw the bags in my cart, and looked at me with that expression I knew all too well. "I need 2 of those," he said, straight up, no beating around the bush. "I got here first," I replied, gripping the cart harder than necessary. He stepped closer. Not threatening, but close enough for me to smell the sweat mixed with dirt. His hands were dirty, calloused, stained with grease, just like mine. He had a helmet mark on his forehead, his hair matted with sweat. And when he looked at me, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't anger, it was tension. But not the kind that comes from a side argument. "It doesn't have to be like this," he said, and his voice came out lower than I expected. I should have let go of one of the bags. It was the right thing to do. But instead, I gripped the cart even tighter, because the grip of my hands gave me some control over what was happening inside me. Something I didn't understand and didn't want to understand. "Get them at the other depot," I said, but my voice came out strange, hoarse. Roberto just stared at me for 3 more seconds. It felt like 30. Then, he just shook his head, gave a crooked smile, the kind that says, "You're being ridiculous," and walked out. I stood there alone with 3 bags of cement I didn't even need that badly, and I realized my hands were shaking. Not from anger, from something I refused to name. The truth is, the more I avoided Roberto, the more I noticed him. I noticed the way he spoke to his team, firm, but without yelling. I noticed how he solved problems without drama. I noticed the line of his jaw when he was focused on reading a blueprint. I noticed, and I got annoyed with myself for noticing. Then came that day in March, a Saturday. The company had landed a big contract with the city, and everyone, all the crews, was called in to help with an emergency job, a retaining wall that had cracked after the rains. If it wasn't fixed fast, there would be a landslide. When I arrived at the site at 7 in the morning, Roberto was already there. Of course, he always arrived early. He was talking to the general foreman, gesturing, pointing at the wall. When he saw me, he just nodded. I nodded back. That's how we operated. Professional, cold, competitive. The work was grueling. Hot sun, dry earth, dust rising. We spent the whole morning working on different points of the wall, me on one side, him on the other, each coordinating our team. Until lunchtime, when the general foreman gathered everyone. "The afternoon is going to be the critical part," he said. "We need 2 foremen working together at the base of the wall. Lucas, Roberto, you 2 will coordinate the reinforcement team." I saw Roberto clench his jaw. He didn't like the idea any more than I did. But we didn't have a choice. So after lunch, we joined up. Side by side, literally. Working in the same trench, giving instructions to the same crew, having to coordinate every move. And for the first time, we had to talk. For real. At first it was just work. Pass the shovel. Hold this. 3 degrees to the left. But after an hour working together, the body adapts. Movements get synchronized. And then the real conversations start. How long have you been in construction? He asked while adjusting a beam. 8 years. You? 9. Started as a helper. Me too. It was weird discovering we had more in common than I imagined. Roberto had started from scratch, just like me. He had fought hard, just like me. He had calluses on the same parts of his hands. And when we laughed, because yes, we started laughing at a few things, his laugh was genuine, without that forced competition. Then it happened. We were finishing positioning one of the reinforcement beams. Heavy stuff, about 200 kilos. There was me, Roberto, and 2 other guys holding it. We needed to fit the beam at a specific angle, and the space was tight. I had to squeeze between the beam and the dirt wall. Roberto was on the other side, holding the other end. "Push it a bit more this way," he shouted. I pushed. The beam started to slide, and suddenly, the ground gave way. Not much. Just enough for me to lose my balance. The beam started tipping toward me, and for a second, a frozen second, I saw those 200 kilos of metal coming straight down on top of me. But before anything could happen, I felt a pull. Hard. Roberto had let go of his side of the beam and yanked me back with so much force that we fell to the ground together. The beam slammed exactly where I had been 2 seconds earlier. Everything went silent for a moment. Just the dust rising. I was on the ground. Roberto on top of me, both of us gasping for air. His weight, the heat, his rapid breathing against my neck. He saved me. Without thinking, without hesitating, he put himself at risk to get me out of there. "You okay?" he asked, still not getting off me. I couldn't answer right away, because I felt it. I felt his heart beating fast against my chest. I felt his hand still gripping my arm, squeezing tight, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear, not for him, for me. "Yeah," I finally said, "you saved me." "Reflex," he replied, but his voice trembled, and it kept shaking when he stood up, when he helped me up, when he looked at me one more time to make sure I was okay. People came running, asked if we were okay. We said yes. They reorganized the beam, went back to work. But Roberto and I stood there for a few more seconds, just looking at each other. "Thanks," I said. He just nodded. But his look, there was something there, something I had seen that day at the supply yard, only now I couldn't pretend I didn't see it anymore. By late afternoon, the job was done. Everyone celebrated, clapped, the foreman gave thanks. Roberto and I stayed sort of apart from the group, drinking water, still covered in dust and sweat. "You've got guts," he said suddenly. "What do you mean?" "The way you work. You're not afraid to take risks." I'm more cautious. Sometimes I think I'm too cautious." That took me by surprise. Roberto, the guy I always thought was arrogant, who was my rival, was opening up to me. "You're good at what you do," I said. And it was true. Always have been, I just didn't want to admit it before. He gave a small smile. Tired. Honest. "We wasted a lot of time competing," he said. "Yeah, we did." And in that moment, with the sun setting behind the wall we had fixed together, I saw something in Roberto I had never seen before. I saw the vulnerability, the exhaustion, the humanity behind the mask of competition. And I also saw the way he was looking at me. It wasn't rivalry anymore. It was something more complicated, more dangerous, more real. The following week was weird. We kept working on separate projects, but now when we crossed paths in the hallways, it wasn't that competitive tension anymore. It was a different tension, one that made my stomach knot every time I saw him walk into a room. Until Thursday, when Roberto texted me. It just said, "Need to talk to you. After work." I stared at the message for 5 minutes. I could ignore it, could make up an excuse. But instead, I typed, "Where?" He suggested a bar near the site. A simple place, for workers. Cold beer and fried snacks. The kind of place where two construction guys could sit without anyone thinking it was weird. When I arrived, he was already there. 2 beers on the table. He looked nervous, his hands restless, picking at the label on the bottle. "Hey," I said, sitting across from him. "Hey." We sat in silence for a few seconds. Then he took a deep breath. "I wanted to thank you, for real, for Saturday. I should be thanking you. You saved me, remember? It's not just that." He paused, looked at his beer. "It's just that. For the last few years, I kind of turned you into an enemy in my head. It was easier that way, competing, measuring myself. But after Saturday, I realized I was wrong." "I did that too," I admitted. "It's easier to compete than, I don't know, than being honest." Roberto looked up, and in that look I saw everything. The fear, the confusion, and something that reflected exactly what I was feeling. "Do you feel it too?" he asked, so quietly I almost didn't hear. I could have pretended I didn't understand, could have deflected, but I was tired of running. "I do," I said. And it was like the whole room went silent, even with all the noise of the bar around us. Roberto let out the breath he was holding. His hands shook again, just like they shook when he helped me up after the fall. "I don't know what to do with this," he confessed. "I don't even know what this is." "Me neither." We sat there, drinking beer, talking about work, about life, about nothing and everything at the same time. But the real conversation was happening in the silences, in the glances, in the way. Without realizing it, we had leaned forward, closing the distance between us. When we left the bar, it was already night. Roberto walked me to my car. We stopped there, under a dim street lamp, neither of us really knowing how to say goodbye. "We could do this again?" he asked. "Talk, without the competition." "We could," I answered. He smiled, a real smile, and for a second, just a second, his hand brushed against mine. It might have been an accident. It might have been on purpose. I didn't ask, but I felt it. "See you next week then," he said. "See you next week." I got in the car and sat there for a few minutes, just processing. What had happened, what was happening, what I was feeling. The truth is, I spent 3 years seeing Roberto as a rival because that was what I could accept. Competition I understood. Anger I understood. But this thing that made my chest tighten when he looked at me, I didn't know how to name this. And I didn't know if I wanted to. But there was one thing I knew. When he trembled in my arms after saving me from that beam, when I saw the fear in his eyes, when he confessed he didn't know what to do with what he felt, that was when I knew. Everything I thought about him was wrong, and everything I thought about myself, too. We had agreed to meet again, talk without the competition. I told myself that was all it was. 2 coworkers trying to be friends. But I was lying, and deep down, I knew it. On the first day working together, I kept my distance. Professional, polite, but distant. It was safer that way. By the 3rd day, that was already impossible. The job site was small, the crew even smaller. There was no escape. He was always nearby. In the morning meeting, at lunch, in the trucks going from one site to another. And the worst part, or maybe the best, I don't know anymore, was that he didn't seem bothered by my presence. Quite the opposite. Everyone was watching. Small town, small job, big gossip. I felt the looks from the other workers when we talked. Veiled comments, quiet snickers. "Look at those 2. Always together, huh?" That should have made me pull back. Should have made me avoid him even more. But there was something about him. Something I couldn't ignore. Maybe because he was hiding something too. On the 4th day, we stayed late reviewing the delivery schedule. Construction was behind, and the boss was applying pressure. It was just the 2 of us in the makeshift room serving as an office. Dim light, stale coffee, exhaustion hitting hard. That was when his guard came down. He started talking about his family, the wife he loved, but with whom he could no longer truly connect. The kids he adored, but who barely knew him because he lived on the road. And then, almost accidentally, he let slip. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life, you know? Like I accepted a script I didn't write." I stopped. I looked at him. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the papers on the table. But you could see the tension in his jaw, the way he was gripping the pen too tight. "I understand," was all I managed to say. And it was true. I understood perfectly, because I was living like that too. Hiding who I was from my family, from my community, from everyone who thought they knew me. Performing an acceptable version of myself every day, until I forgot who I really was. He wasn't my rival. He was my mirror. From then on, something changed. The tension between us didn't decrease, but it gained another layer. It wasn't just professional competition anymore. The wounded pride, the silent struggle for respect. There was something else, something heavier, more dangerous. We started sharing meals, not because anyone invited the other, but because it just happened. I'd grab my lunchbox, he'd grab his, and we'd end up sitting in the same corner, away from the others. Conversations that started about concrete and schedules always drifted to other places. Family, past, regrets. He told me about the first time he really fell in love. It was intense and desperate, he said. The woman was taken. He was too young, and it all ended before it began. But the memory still hurt. "And you?" he asked, looking me in the eye for the first time in that conversation. "Have you ever fallen in love like that?" I swallowed hard. "Yes." "And what happened?" "It didn't work out," I replied, avoiding his eyes. "It never does, right?" He stayed silent for a while. Then, in a lower voice, almost a whisper, "Maybe because we don't let ourselves." My heart raced. I didn't know if he was talking about me, him, or both of us. But the way he said that had weight. It had intention. I should have changed the subject, should have gotten up and walked away, but I didn't do any of that. We sat there in the silence, surrounded by the distant noise of the construction. And in that moment, I realized that exhaustion was breaking down our defenses. The constant proximity, the long conversations, the shared meals. All of this was creating an intimacy neither of us had planned. There were days we took the same truck to get from one part of the site to another. The space was tight, our shoulders touching with the rocking of the vehicle. I tried to pull away, but there was nowhere to go. And the worst part? I didn't want to pull away. Once, he reached out to grab a water bottle from the glove compartment, and his hand brushed against mine by accident. It was a quick, innocent touch, but the electricity that shot through me was absurd. He felt it too. I know he felt it, because he froze for a second before grabbing the bottle and returning to his seat. Neither of us said anything. But the tension in the air was undeniable. The other workers' comments continued. But now, when someone made a mean joke or a prejudiced comment near him, he'd retort. Firmly. With a defense that completely caught me off guard. "Lucas is competent as hell," he said once, in front of everyone, after one of the guys made a joke about me being too delicate for construction work. "If you guys stopped bothering him and paid attention to your own work, this job would already be finished." I was speechless. No one had ever defended me like that. No one. That night, when we were alone again, I thanked him. He shrugged as if it were nothing. "I just spoke the truth." "But you didn't have to." "Yes, I did." He looked me in the eyes. "You don't deserve to hear that kind of thing." The way he said it, protective, but also too personal. It wasn't a co-worker's defense. It was something else. 15 minutes later, we were reviewing the foundation blueprints when he made a joke, some silly thing about a wrong measurement the intern had marked. I laughed. And it wasn't a polite, forced laugh. It was genuine. He laughed too, and for the first time since we met, I saw his mask completely fall. The tough, manly guy, always in control, vanished. In his place was a tired, vulnerable, and terrifyingly human man. Our eyes met, and the laughter slowly died. The air shifted. I felt it. He felt it too. The room grew smaller, hotter. The space between us seemed charged, vibrating with something neither of us was ready to name. He cleared his throat and looked away first. "It's late," he said, his voice a little hoarser. "We should go." "Yeah," I agreed, but didn't move. He stood up, tidied the papers, avoiding my gaze. I did the same. We left together, but in silence. A heavy silence, laden with everything unsaid. When we reached the parking lot, he stopped beside his car. I stopped too, not knowing exactly why. "See you tomorrow," he said. "See ya." He got in his car and drove away. And I stood there, still, trying to understand what the hell had just happened. I didn't know if I was relieved or disappointed that he had pulled back. Maybe both. Because in that moment, I realized something that terrified me. I was no longer fighting the attraction. I was fighting the urge to stop fighting it. And that's when everything truly changed. Because the crisis wasn't just out there. It was inside him. And for the first time, he didn't have the strength to hold it in. We had returned to my apartment. He was silent most of the way. Not the comfortable silence from before, but that heavy silence. The kind you feel in your chest. When we closed the door, he stood still, his back to me, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. I spoke his name, softly. He didn't answer. I approached. Slowly. Like when you don't want to scare someone who's on the verge of something. "Are you okay?" He let out a laugh, but there was nothing funny about it. "I'm far from okay." His voice cracked, and I realized he was trembling, not from cold, from something much bigger than that. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," he continued. "I don't know who I am anymore. I look at you and everything I've built, everything I've always believed about myself, crumbles." I placed my hand on his shoulder, felt the tension there. All the strength he had always carried was vibrating, about to break. "You don't need to have all the answers now." He turned to me. And man, his eyes. I had never seen him like this. Vulnerable, lost, scared. "But I need to understand what this means. What you mean." My heart pounded, because this was the conversation. The real one. The one we had avoided from the beginning. "I can't explain," I said. "I just know that when you're near, everything makes more sense. And when you're not, it's like something's missing." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and when he opened them again, there were tears there. I feel the same way, and it terrifies me. He tried to turn his face, to hide. Because men like him don't cry, right? They don't show weakness. They don't break down. But I didn't let him. I touched his face, carefully, as if holding something fragile. "You don't need to hide from me." And that's when it happened. He tried to hold it in, tried to maintain his composure. But when I got closer, when I placed my hand on his chest and felt his heart beating erratically, he collapsed. Literally, he pulled me close, strongly, as if I were the only solid thing in a world that was falling apart. And I felt him tremble. It wasn't just a hug. It was total surrender. It was a man who had spent his entire life being strong, being tough, being unshakable. And now he was allowing himself to break. His arms around me were tight, desperate, as if I could disappear at any moment. I could feel his breath on my neck, irregular, warm, each exhalation laden with raw emotion. "I can't pretend anymore," he whispered against my skin. "I can't ignore this anymore." I held him back, with the same intensity, because I was feeling all of that too. The same confusion, the same fear, but also something more. Something I had never felt with such force. I pulled back just enough to look at him. Our faces were inches apart. I could count every eyelash. See the shine of the tears he wouldn't let fall. "Then don't pretend," I said. And it was as if something broke. He rested his forehead against mine, closed his eyes, and we stayed like that, breathing the same air, feeling the same warmth. It wasn't sexual. It was something much deeper. It was intimacy in the purest sense of the word. It was allowing oneself to be seen, completely. I felt his weight against me. Not just the physical weight, but the emotional weight. Years of denial, of repression, of fighting against something he didn't even fully understand. And now all of that was right there, between us, vibrating. "I'm afraid," he confessed. so quiet I almost didn't hear it. Of what? Of everything. Of what this means. Of what people will think. Of what I'll lose if I let myself feel this. I ran my hand through his hair, slowly, in a gesture of comfort. And what if you think about what you'll gain? He opened his eyes. He looked at me in a way that pierced right through me. I've already gained too much, he said. And that scares me even more. Because now I know what it is. And I don't know if I can live without it. My God. How do you respond to that? I didn't answer. I just stayed there, holding him, letting him feel everything he needed to feel. And then, it happened. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was both of us at the same time. But suddenly, the distance between us disappeared completely. His lips touched mine. And, man, it was different. Completely different. It wasn't like that first accidental kiss. Rushed. Confused. This one was intentional, slow, as if we had all the time in the world. I felt every breath, every tremor, every hesitation turning into certainty. His hand came up to my face. Careful. Reverent even. Like I was something precious. And in the middle of that kiss, I felt him tremble again. But this time it wasn't fear. It was relief. It was surrender. It was acceptance. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine again, eyes still closed. "This is real," he said, not as a question, as a statement. "It is," I replied. He took a deep breath. And when he opened his eyes, there was something different there, a clarity that didn't exist before. But there was panic too, because reality was starting to come back, and with it, all the implications. I saw the exact moment it happened. His expression changed. His body tensed up again. "I can't," he began. "You can," I said. "You don't understand." He took a step back, and I felt the distance like a physical blow. I have a life, a career, a reputation. I can't just throw all that away. No one is asking you to throw anything away. That's not how it works. You know that. He ran his hands over his face, frustrated. If someone finds out, if someone even suspects. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. We were in a conservative environment, competitive, where weakness was punished, where being different was grounds for exclusion. And what had just happened between us? It was the definition of different. "So what are you going to do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Pretend this didn't happen?" He looked at me, and I saw the struggle happening right there, between what he felt and what he thought he should do. "I don't know," he admitted. And that honesty hurt more than any lie. "I just need time. I need to process all this." He grabbed his jacket, headed for the door. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him to stay. I wanted to say that time wouldn't change what was already between us. But I didn't say anything, because forcing it wouldn't help. This he needed to resolve on his own. He stopped with his hand on the doorknob. For a second, I thought he was going to come back, that he was going to say something, but he just opened the door and left. Without looking back, I stood there, in the middle of the living room, still feeling his warmth on my skin, his taste on my lips, and wondering if I should have run after him. But something told me no, that he needed this distance, this space to breathe, even if it killed me inside. I sat down on the couch, where minutes ago we had been so close, and now it felt like there was an ocean between us. The apartment was too quiet, as if the air had left along with him. I leaned my head back, closed my eyes, and let it all hit me. The intensity, the vulnerability, the fear, but also the certainty. Because as scary as all that was, one thing I knew with absolute conviction. That was real. What I felt for him was real. And it didn't matter how much time he needed, how much fear he had, how much resistance he put up. I knew he felt the same. I had felt it in the tremors, in the way he held me, in the kiss that carried so much weight it almost knocked me over. So I waited. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight. It's giving space for the other person to find their own courage, even if that means being alone, in the silence, not knowing if they'll come back, or if you just lost the only thing that really mattered. 3 days. We didn't speak. I saw him once. He looked away, and that silence was worse than any scream. Because inside me, everything was screaming. Every second that passed without us talking, it was as if that moment in the cabin was becoming unreal. Like I had invented it. Like none of that had actually happened. But it had happened, and I knew it because I couldn't stop feeling his heartbeat. Not mine, his. That frantic, desperate rhythm against my chest. The hot breath on my neck. The way he held me, as if he were clinging to something he had never dared to touch before. I'd close my eyes and be back there again, in the cabin, with him. And every time it happened, my stomach churned. Fear, desire, confusion, all at once, because going back to being rivals was impossible now. But continuing? Continuing with what exactly? We didn't even know what that was. And even if we did, how could we explain it to people? To his family? To mine? My dad was already getting suspicious. You've been quiet lately. Did something happen at work? Work. That was another problem. The project was a mess. We had a tight deadline, and I was completely distracted. Every time I looked at the papers, the words blurred together. I'd reread the same line 3-4 times and nothing made sense. Because my mind was with him. And worst of all was the judgment. Not actual judgment, nobody knew. But the judgment I felt coming from all sides, as if people could see right through me. As if it were written on my forehead. I kissed Roberto, and I liked it. In town, gossip was already circulating, but for other reasons. Did you see Roberto acting weird? He's been distant lately. And Lucas? Looks like he's got something on his mind. No one was connecting the dots. Yet. But I knew it was a matter of time. Because in a small town, secrets don't last long. I tried to convince myself that it had been a mistake. A moment of weakness. Testosterone? Adrenaline? I don't know. We'd competed our whole lives, maybe that was just an extension of it. A different battle, but still a battle. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Because it wasn't a battle. It was surrender. Complete surrender. And I couldn't stop thinking about the way he looked at me afterwards. Scared, yes. But also, relieved. As if he had been carrying that for years and could finally breathe. Was he feeling the same as I was right now? Fear mixed with a desperate desire to go back to that moment? Or was he regretting it? That doubt was eating me alive. Because if he regretted it, if he had decided it was a mistake, I didn't know if I could handle it. Not after feeling what I felt. Not after discovering there was this version of me I had never known. The week dragged on. I avoided places where I knew I might run into him. Changed my lunch hour. Took alternative routes to avoid passing near his shop. But I couldn't run forever. Because on Friday, there was the annual community fundraiser. The kind of event where everyone in town shows up, including me. Including him. I thought about not going, pretended I was sick, made up some excuse. But my mom wouldn't accept it. You are going. The whole family is going. And you're not staying home alone feeling unwell. So I went. And of course he was there. I saw him from afar, talking to a group of people. He was laughing, gesturing, seeming completely normal, as if nothing had happened. As if that night in the cabin was just a dream of mine. And that hurt. It hurt because I couldn't pretend. I couldn't laugh, make conversation, act normally. I was stuck in that moment, and he seemed to have moved on. Or at least, that's what it looked like. I avoided him the whole night. Stayed in the opposite corner of the hall, talked to random people, forced smiles, but my body was on high alert. Every time I felt he was close, my heart raced. And then, it happened. I was coming out of the bathroom when I bumped into him in the hallway. Literally, shoulder to shoulder. We stopped, looked at each other, and in that second, it all came back. The cabin, the kiss, the fear, the truth. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I couldn't speak either. It was someone else who broke the silence. A mutual friend appeared out of nowhere, drunk, throwing his arm around our shoulders. "Hey! The town's two biggest rivals. Have you guys made peace yet, or are you still fighting?" Roberto and I glanced at each other, and then he said quietly, just for me to hear, "We need to talk." My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. We pulled away from our friend with vague excuses and went out the back door. The cold night air hit me hard, but it wasn't enough to cool the heat rising in my chest. We stood there, in the empty parking lot, in silence, until he finally spoke. "I'm scared." His voice came out shaky, vulnerable. I took a deep breath. "Me too, but I can't stop thinking about you." And there it was, the raw truth, undisguised. I felt my eyes burn. Neither can I. He ran his hand over his face, tiredly. "This is crazy. We have lives, families, responsibilities. People are going to." "I know. And yet, I know." We fell silent again. But this time it was different. It wasn't the heavy silence of the last 3 days. It was the silence of two people who were finally being honest. He leaned against the wall, looking up at the sky. "I've never told anyone this, but I've felt this before." My heart raced. Felt what? This attraction to a man. He looked at me, and in his eyes were years of denial, fear, repression. It was a long time ago. I was younger, and I buried it so deep I thought it had disappeared. I didn't know what to say. He continued. "My family. My dad found out. Not exactly, but he suspected. And he made it very clear what he thought of people like that. So I got married. Built a life. Pretended none of it ever existed." "And did it work?" I asked quietly. He laughed, but without humor. "It worked until you. That hit me like a punch in the gut. You showed up with that stupid competition, that childish rivalry, and I thought I hated you. But it wasn't hate. It was fear. Fear of what I felt when you were around. Fear that if I admitted it, everything I built would crumble." I took a step toward him. "And now?" He looked at me, and for the first time, there was no defensiveness, no anger, only exhaustion and truth. "Now I don't know. I just know I can't pretend anymore." My voice came out hoarse. "Then don't." The distance between us closed, slowly, cautiously. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to be this. How to be honest with everyone, with my family, with the community." "We don't have to figure it all out tonight," I said, and my hand found his. "But we can't pretend this didn't happen either." He squeezed my hand. Hard. "I don't want to pretend." And there, in that empty parking lot, under the dark, starry sky, we stood, just holding hands. But it was more than any kiss. It was a choice. It was courage. Until his phone rang. He looked at the screen and closed his eyes. My wife, asking where I am. Reality came rushing back. He let go of my hand slowly, but before walking away, he looked at me one last time. "We're going to have to deal with this. With the consequences." "I know. And it won't be easy." "I know." He hesitated, then said, almost in a whisper, "But I want to try." And he left. I stood there, alone, my heart pounding out of rhythm, because for the first time in 3 days, I wasn't just confused. I was scared, but also hopeful. We didn't have answers. We didn't have a plan. But we had the truth. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start. But as I headed back to the party, pretending everything was fine, a part of me knew the storm was just beginning. Because secrets don't stay buried forever. And when they surface, they either set you free or destroy you. The pressure started exactly how I feared, with looks. My mother noticed first. I was spending too much time with Roberto, lunches that turned into whole afternoons, weekends collaborating on projects that, honestly, any of our employees could have handled alone. But we found excuses. We always did. "You're getting too involved with that man," she said one Thursday night, while I was organizing papers at the kitchen table. It wasn't a question. It was a statement loaded with concern. "We're working together, Mom. It's an important business partnership." People are talking. Those 3 words. Simple. Devastating. People are talking. I pretended I didn't care, but I did. Because in a town like ours, comments turn into gossip. Gossip turns into truth. And truth turns into a weapon. Roberto was facing the same thing. Maybe worse. His family was more traditional than mine. His father, a 70-year-old man who built the business from scratch, had very clear expectations about how a man should behave, who he should be seen with, what kind of friendships he should cultivate. "My old man called me into his office yesterday," Roberto told me on a Tuesday, while we were reviewing contracts at a cafe far from downtown. He looked tired. "Said I'm devoting too much attention to our partnership, that I'm neglecting the family business. But the partnership is going well. The numbers prove it. It's not about numbers." He stirred his cold coffee. "It's about perception, about what people are saying." There it was again. The people. Always the damn people. The pressure increased when clients started asking indirect questions. "You two are pretty close, huh?" With that smile that didn't reach their eyes. "Interesting partnership you guys have," with an emphasis on interesting that turned the word into something dirty. I tried to distance myself. I honestly tried. I canceled 2 lunches, answered messages with calculated delays, invented appointments that didn't exist, tried to rebuild that safe distance we had before all this started. Roberto noticed immediately. "You're avoiding me," he said when we finally met up, almost 2 weeks later. It wasn't an accusation. It was pure sadness. "I'm not avoiding you. I'm just being more careful." "Careful of what?" "Of what people will think." "You don't understand. My family." "I understand perfectly," he interrupted me. "My family is putting on the same pressure. My father suggested I should focus on more traditional partnerships. My mother asked if I was going through some sort of crisis." A crisis. As if the problem were me, and not the rest of this rotten world. The anger in his voice disarmed me. Roberto never got angry. Always controlled, always measured. But right there, in that moment, he was furious. "So what now?" I asked. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. You tell me. Because the way I see it, we have 2 options. We can keep hiding, pretending we're just business partners while everyone whispers behind our backs. Or we can stop caring so much about what others think." Easy to say. I know it's not easy. But what's the alternative? Living in fear? Living a lie? That conversation stayed with me. Whole days. Whole nights. Because he was right. We were living in a kind of limbo, where everything that mattered happened in private spaces, away from prying eyes, as if there was something shameful in what we felt. And people were drifting away. Friends who stopped calling. Colleagues who made excuses to avoid lunch. The isolation was subtle, but real. One Saturday, there was a formal gala downtown. One of those events that every entrepreneur in the city attends because it's expected, because it's tradition, because appearances matter. I arrived alone. Roberto did too. We greeted each other with that formal handshake that professionally acquainted people exchange, polite, distant, safe. And I hated every second of it. I hated pretending he was just another acquaintance. I hated smiling at people I knew were spreading rumors. I hated being in that crowded hall, surrounded by empty conversations, feeling completely alone. Roberto was on the other side of the room, talking to a group of businessmen. He looked at me, just a glance, but it was enough. Because in his eyes, I saw the same thing I was feeling: exhaustion, frustration, anger at having to pretend, and something inside me broke. I walked across the room. I didn't run, I didn't make a scene, I just walked with purpose, ignoring the curious glances, the conversations that stopped mid-sentence as I passed. I reached the group where Roberto was. "Excuse me," I said, interrupting some comment about the real estate market. "I need to steal Roberto for a minute," and we moved to a more secluded corner of the hall, still visible, but with some privacy. "What's going on?" Roberto asked, confused. "I'm tired," I said. Simple as that. Tired of pretending. Tired of hiding. Tired of caring more about what these people think than what I feel. Roberto remained silent, processing. "And what do you feel?" "You know what I feel." "I need to hear you say it." My heart was pounding. We were in a corner of the hall, but we weren't invisible. People could see. People could hear if we spoke louder. And for the first time, I didn't care. "I feel like you're the first person in years who truly sees me. Not the businessman, not the son who has to live up to expectations. You see me. And when I'm with you, I don't have to pretend to be anything other than who I am." The words came out in one breath, years of repression unraveling in seconds. Roberto said nothing. He just held out his hand. I looked at that hand. I understood what it represented. It wasn't just a gesture of affection. It was a choice, a public declaration. I could ignore it. I could laugh, make some joke, turn that moment into something that could be safely explained. Or I could be honest. I took his hand. There, in that hall full of city entrepreneurs, with people watching us, with gossip being planted that very second, I held Roberto's hand and didn't let go. "Let them talk," I said softly, just for him to hear. "I'm tired of hiding." I saw the expression on his face change. Surprise first, then something deeper. Relief, perhaps, or gratitude. "Are you sure?" he asked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." We stood there, hands intertwined, while the world kept spinning around us. Conversations happened, people laughed, drank, pretended not to look while obviously they were. And then something happened that I didn't expect. Sandra, a businesswoman I had known for years, approached us. She was respected, had an impressive network of contacts. She was one of those people whose opinion mattered in business circles. I braced myself for the worst. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said with a genuine smile. Not that political smile we know from events like this. A real smile. "Good evening, Sandra," Roberto replied, and I noticed he didn't let go of my hand. "You know people are talking, right?" Here it came. "They're saying your partnership is the most solid this city has seen in years, that you're planning to expand into 3 new neighborhoods, that you'll generate at least 50 direct jobs." I blinked, confused. "So keep doing what you're doing," she continued, "because good businesses are rare, and partners who truly understand each other are even rarer." She winked at us and walked away, leaving us processing. "She knew," Roberto said softly. "She knew," I confirmed. "And she didn't care." Apparently not. That moment should have been comforting. And it was, in a way. But the reality is that one ally didn't erase the pressure coming from all other sides. Because the following Monday, my father called me for a conversation. "Your behavior at Saturday's event generated comments," he said bluntly. "What kind of comments?" "The kind that can affect business, the kind that can affect our reputation." "Is our reputation threatened because I held a business partner's hand?" "Don't be naive. You know exactly what I'm talking about." And I knew. Of course I knew. "So, what do you want me to do? That I end the partnership? That I distance myself from someone who has been crucial to the growth of our company?" "I want you to be smart. To think of the family, of the legacy we've built. And if the price of the legacy is to lie about who I am?" My father remained silent, not because he had no answer, but because his answer was clear. Yes, it would be worth it. For him, it always would be. That night, Roberto called me. He was going through the same thing. "My father gave me an ultimatum," he said, his voice tense. "Either I distance myself from you, professionally and personally, or he reevaluates my position in the company. Can he do that? He's the owner. He can do whatever he wants." We fell silent on the line. two adults facing the impossible choice between authenticity and security. "And what are you going to do?" I finally asked. "That depends on you." "On me?" "I need to know if it's worth it. I need to know if you're really with me, or if Saturday was just a moment of impulse." My heart raced. Because that was the real question, wasn't it? It wasn't about business or reputation. It was about what I was willing to risk. What he meant to me. "Roberto, Don't answer now," he interrupted me. "Think. Really think. Because if we continue, it won't be easy. There will be consequences. And I need to know if you're ready to face that with me." He hung up before I could answer. I stood there in my apartment, holding the phone, facing the most important choice of my life. I could go back. I could hide again. I could rebuild those safe walls and live an acceptable, approved, expected life. Or I could choose the truth. I could choose him. I could choose to live authentically, whatever the cost. And for the first time, I understood what those people we studied meant when they said vulnerability is strength. Because the scariest thing I could do was also the bravest. I picked up the phone and wrote a message. "I choose you. I choose the truth. I choose to live, whatever the cost." I sent it before I could regret it. The reply came 3 minutes later. "Then we face this together, and we'll be stronger together than we ever were alone and hiding." And there, in that moment, the last barrier began to fall. My brother's question hung in the air like smoke. "Are you in love with him?" I could have lied. I could have laughed, deflected, changed the subject like I had my whole life. But in that moment, with Roberto sitting there beside me, our hands intertwined under the table where no one could see, I realized something. I was tired of trembling. "Yes," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "I am in love with him." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother stopped with her fork in the air. My father stared at his plate. My sister's eyes went wide. "And Roberto?" Roberto squeezed my hand so hard I felt every bone in his fingers. It was my father who spoke first. He didn't look me in the eye. He just said, with that deep, controlled voice, "Is this a phase?" "No, Dad. It's who I've always been." And then something happened that I never imagined possible. My mother, that woman who 2 months ago had cried when I said I was confused, that woman who had prayed every night asking for me to come to my senses. She stood up, walked over to me, and put her hand on my shoulder. "Are you happy?" she asked, and her voice was cracking. For the first time in a long time, yes. She looked at Roberto. Really looked. As if seeing him for the first time not as the problem, but as the person who had made her son smile again. "Then that's good," she said. And she went back to her chair. It wasn't perfect. My father left the table without finishing his food. My brother stayed silent for the rest of the night, but my sister came to hug me later and whispered in my ear, "I already knew, and I just wanted you to stop hiding." That night, in my room, Roberto hugged me differently. There wasn't that usual urgency, that fear that someone would see, that the moment would end. It was the hug of someone who finally had permission to stay. "You didn't tremble," he said, his voice full of wonder. I know, neither did I. And it was true. His hands were steady on my back. There wasn't that tremor I felt every time he touched me in the first few months, that tension of someone doing something forbidden. Now it was just real. "You know that night at your apartment?" I asked. "When you were shaking so much I thought you were afraid of me?" "I was afraid of myself," he confessed, "afraid of what feeling this meant, of what having you meant. And now?" He pulled me closer, until our foreheads touched. "Now I'm afraid of losing you." That's when I kissed him. Right there, in my room, with the door unlocked, with my family in the next room, with all the lights on. A kiss that hid nothing. A kiss that asked for no apologies. And when we pulled apart, I spoke the truth that had scared me for months. "I love you." "I love you too," he replied, without hesitating. The next week was strange. My father still wouldn't talk to me properly. Some neighbors gave us dirty looks when they saw me with Roberto. At the gym, 2 guys who were my friends started avoiding me. But something had fundamentally changed inside me. I was no longer waiting for permission to exist. At work, when a colleague made a homophobic joke in the break room, I didn't laugh along like I always did. I looked at him and said, "That's not funny." And I walked out of the room. It was a small gesture, but for me it was revolutionary. Because for the first time, I wasn't protecting my masculinity at the expense of my humanity. Roberto noticed the change. "You're different," he said one night, while we were cooking together in my kitchen. He had brought ingredients to make pasta one of my favorite meals. "Different how?" "Lighter. Like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders." He was right. I did feel lighter. Because carrying a secret the size of who you really are, hiding it from everyone, even from yourself, that's heavy as hell. And I had finally set that weight down. "You know what's funny?" I said, watching him chop the herbs with that meticulous precision. "I always thought that if I came out, I'd lose everything. My family, my friends, my job, my life." "And did you?" "I lost some things, but what I gained..." I paused, searching for the right words. "I gained myself back." He stopped chopping and looked at me with those eyes that really saw me. "You gained me too. Technically, you're the one who gained me. You were the one who trembled first that night." He laughed, and the sound filled the kitchen. "I trembled because I'd never felt anything so intense. You looked at me in a way that completely disarmed me. You were so vulnerable that night. I just wanted to hold you and tell you everything would be okay. And you did. You held me and you stayed. No one had ever stayed before." There was a sadness in that statement that broke my heart. Thinking of all the times he had felt alone, hidden. Thinking love was something he didn't deserve. "I'm staying," I promised. "No matter how hard it gets. I'm staying. Even if your dad never accepts it? Even then? Even if you lose more friends? I'd rather lose friends than lose myself again." He crossed the kitchen and kissed me, and this time, when we pulled apart, neither of us was trembling. We were steady, anchored, real. 3 months later, something unexpected happened. My dad asked to talk to me. "Just the 2 of us," he said. "Without your mom, without anyone." I went prepared for the worst. I thought he was going to give me an ultimatum, or ask me not to bring Roberto to family gatherings, or something like that. But when we got to the bar where he asked to meet, he just ordered 2 beers and stayed silent for a long time. "I don't know how to do this," he finally said. "Do what?" "Be the father of a gay son." The words still sounded strange coming from his mouth, but he had said it. He had got it out. "You don't need to do anything different, Dad. You just need to keep being my dad." I grew up in a different time, where a man was one way and anything else was. He paused, struggling with the words. "Was wrong. I know. But I saw you at that dinner, when you said you were in love." He finally looked me in the eyes. I saw courage. "You were more of a man in that moment than I've ever been in my whole life." I wasn't expecting that. My hands started to shake, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was relief. "I don't understand," he continued. "Maybe I never fully will. But you are my son, and if this Roberto makes you happy, then I want to get to know him for real, not as the problem, as the person you love." It was my turn to stay silent, because this was the acceptance I had never dared to hope for. "Thank you, Dad. Just give me time. I'm old and stubborn, but I'm trying." And that was enough, more than enough. That night, when I told Roberto, he cried. Not that silent crying he used to try to hide, but an open, relieved cry, like someone who could finally breathe. "You don't know how much this means," he said between sobs. "Having your father's approval. I never had that. My dad kicked me out of the house when I was 16. I didn't know that. There was so much we were still discovering about each other, so many layers of pain and resilience." My dad will be your dad too now, I promised. If you want, I want that. I want everything with you. 6 months after that conversation, we took our first trip together as a couple. Not hidden, not in secret. We told everyone, posted photos, lived openly. And you know what happened? Some people drifted away, but others came closer. People who were living their own versions of hiding who they were, who saw in us the courage they were looking for. One day, a kid stopped me on the street. Couldn't have been more than 20. "Are you Lucas?" he asked shyly. "I am. I saw your photos with your boyfriend, and that gave me the courage to tell my parents." "And how did it go?" "Hard, but liberating." I hugged that boy I'd never seen before in my life, because I knew exactly what he was feeling. That combination of fear and freedom, of loss and gain, of endings and beginnings. Today, 2 years after that first night, I felt him tremble in my arms. I can say for sure, my rival became my mirror, and my mirror became my home. Because it was in competing with him that I discovered who I really was. It was in the hate-masking attraction that I found the truth about myself. It was in his vulnerability that I learned to be vulnerable too. And that night, when I felt him tremble, when I saw that strong, confident man come undone in my arms, that was the moment we both became brave. Because courage isn't about not being afraid. Courage is trembling and choosing love anyway. Today, we no longer tremble. Not because we aren't afraid. The world is still tough. People still judge. There are still battles to fight. But now, we tremble together. And when you have someone trembling by your side, holding your hand, choosing you every single day, you discover you can get through any storm. If this story made you feel seen, I want you to know, you are not alone. Everyone who has ever hidden a part of themselves, who has ever been afraid to be authentic, who has ever trembled at the thought of showing who they really are, I see you. And I'm here to tell you it's worth it. The fear is worth it. The uncertainty is worth it. Losing the people who can't accept you is worth it, because you gain yourself in the process. And there is nothing more valuable than that. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt like you had to hide who you really are? What was that process like for you? I read all comments and love exchanging these experiences with you. And if you want more real stories about authenticity, vulnerability, and finding courage in the most unexpected places, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Every week I bring stories that make you feel less alone. That's all for today. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for letting me share this part of myself with you. And remember, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be true. See you next time.